If you ever looked at the map of the Roman Empire, you might notice one part of Europe that never came under imperial control: Ireland. Yes, this island was lucky enough to avoid being invaded by the Romans, and indeed the Irish people maintained their independence until the English eventually came a knockin'. But were the Irish really lucky? Did they miss out on not being Roman? Hello everyone, I'm Matt Mitrovich, the alternate historian. Let's talk about the time Rome almost conquered Ireland, and please stay tuned to the end of the video for a special announcement. So I was inspired to make this video after watching Roman Ireland by Charles Snart, host of the popular YouTube channel The Histocrat. In that video, Charles discusses the controversy or whether or not Rome ever invaded Ireland. Now, while most historians don't think Rome did, there are some historical records that suggest otherwise, and a growing amount of archaeological evidence which at least points to a much greater Roman presence in Ireland, or Hibernia, as the Romans called it, than was initially suspected. Thus, it could be possible that Rome tried to invade Ireland, but failed. Fascinated by this idea, I did a little more digging on my own. What I found was that Romans certainly knew of Ireland, which at the time was divided among a variety of Celtic kingdoms and tribes only occasionally united under a high king. There are in fact many accounts of the island from earlier Greek and Phoenician travelers and traders who even left their trash behind, such as a monkey skull. It also appears to be generally accepted that Gnaeus Julius Agricola, the Roman governor of Britannia from 77 AD to 85 AD, wanted to invade Ireland, or at the very least thought it could be done easily, and we've certainly heard that story before. Still, he did have multiple legions with experience fighting the Celtic tribes of Britannia and a navy that could transport his soldiers. Agricola supposedly even had an exiled Irish prince, whom he might have considered useful as a puppet ruler should the Romans ever invade on his behalf. There is also evidence that Rome built forts or trading posts on the island, and other archaeological evidence suggests that Romans, or later Romano-British, traveled to and throughout Ireland for one reason or another. Nevertheless, the failed Roman invasion of Ireland is still a controversial theory, but one that can't be dismissed outright and perhaps may become a historical fact, much like the Norse discovery of the Americas, if or when more evidence is uncovered. But at least for our purposes, the question of Rome invading Ireland is less a question of could they, and more of a question of what if they did and succeeded. So let's assume the Romans launched an invasion of Ireland and were successful. What happens next? Well, some of the reasons that might have prevented a Roman invasion in our timeline was both the great expense of such an expedition and the need for experienced legions elsewhere in the empire. So, if the invasion is successful, the cost of it and the need to redeploy those troops quickly means the new Roman province of Hibernia is mostly contained to the eastern coast of Ireland, with Roman client states in the interior to act as buffer states, which follows Rome's standard practice in conquering new regions. Meanwhile, the Irish tribes further west might continue to resist and likely be where you would find the last vestiges of Irish culture in later centuries. With the conquest over, the Romans would get to building cities, roads, and forts across Hibernia. They would also try to wring as much economic value out of the island as possible. Now, there is evidence that Ireland's soil may not have been great for agriculture during this era, but the island may have been a great location for raising livestock, which could be a source of both food and leather for the Roman army. Slaves would also be a big export of Hibernia, as in our timeline many Irish were taken as slaves into Britannia. In this alternate timeline, however, an even greater number of slaves would be removed from Hibernia to Britannia and perhaps other parts of the Roman Empire. Speaking of Britannia, piracy in the Irish Sea was a problem in our timeline for the Romans. Indeed, the famous St. Patrick of Ireland was supposedly captured as a boy by Irish pirates and taken as a slave to Ireland. But in this alternate timeline, the Romans would have complete control of the Irish Sea, and thus Pat would never have such an eventful life. Unfortunately, it's hard to say with any plausibility what centuries of Roman rule in Ireland would look like. One thing we say with some certainty is that Roman rule would have a major impact on the Irish language. The influx of Latin speakers might even turn Irish into a Romance language like French, Italian, or Spanish. I think we can also agree that having a Roman Ireland wouldn't necessarily save the empire, at least the western bits, so Hibernia's history would likely mirror Britannia's history. Thus, when the legions still leave the Isles, presumably around 410 AD, Hibernia will be on its own. However, Hibernia may avoid the fate of the Romano-British, since Ireland did not receive any major Germanic migrations in our timeline. Indeed, the Romano-British may arrive in Hibernia as refugees and help shore up Roman culture on the island. Thus, Hibernia would act as a continuation of the Western Roman Empire, sort of like other Western Roman successor states, but it would be much more successful. They may even remain in contact with the Eastern Roman Empire, aka the Byzantines, but I assume they will politely reject any attempts by Constantinople to assert their authority on the island. Perhaps the island would eventually be unified under some Hibernian official or an Irish king in the west. This new leader may resurrect the title of High King, but maintain much of the technology, infrastructure, and learning the Romans brought to Hibernia. Thus, the High Kingdom of Hibernia is much more developed and unified during the Middle Ages, and can defend itself better from later incursions by the Vikings, Normans, and of course, the English. What a unified, independent Ireland does next is hard to say. Do they attempt to meddle in the affairs of Britain? Do they send out explorers to discover and colonize the rest of the world? Frankly, I don't know what would happen next, but if you are curious about one alternate historian's take on the question, I do recommend checking out the classic web original short story, The Irish Empire by John J. Riley, link in the description below, which I admit to cribbing some ideas from for this video. However, one thing I can tell you will happen is that yours truly is going to be one of the keynote speakers at the 2026 Intelligent Speech Conference, happening on February 28th. This year's theme is Companions and Rivals, and I got a what if brewing about two friends who are both really good at Nazi killing. If you want to check it out, go buy your tickets now. My subscribers can get a discount by using the code ALT, that's A-L-T, ALT. This will get you a chance to not only see me speak, but see other presentations and roundtable discussions by some of the greatest history communicators out there right now. So go get your tickets, and I can't wait to see you there. Well, that's all I have to say on the subject. If you enjoy what I do, please like, comment, subscribe, share this video, support me on Patreon. I'm Matt Mitrich, the Alternate Historian. Bye.